Hello, everybody. Welcome to this training video, which is about how to fill in spending and donation returns after an election. So I'm making this actually on the 2nd of May 2025, where we've just had local elections in councils in England. But you can apply this to by-elections at local level in England and other places as well. The principle is the same. The forms may slightly differ because they may say Wales at the top rather than England, or they may say parish rather than local level, but the principle is the same. And what you have to do is fill in the spending returns, and after them, you need to sign declarations both by the candidate and the agent. So the best thing to do is dive in and look at the forms and see how they are filled out, because everyone who stood in an election has to do this within 5 weeks of the day that the election result has been declared. So let's just share my screen here and we can see my training document for Heritage Party candidates on spending returns and declarations. So I'll just read through this here. This is for local elections, but yeah, this applies to all elections, as I said before. These forms must be completed, signed, and handed in within 5 weeks of election day. There are criminal penalties for not doing so. You've got to fill in the spending return, which also includes your donations. I could call it a spending and donation return. Candidate's declaration, agent's declaration. You have to declare certain items of spending and also certain donations on the form. This is to comply with electoral law. So all payments of £20 and over made by you, the candidate, or your agent, if you're your own agent, it doesn't really matter in practice, but you have to declare all payments of over £20, so sort of £20 and over. So if you buy something to do with your campaign that's £19.99, you don't have to declare it. But if it's £20, you do. I suppose the reason for this is so that you don't have to declare every little item that you spend. So if you buy a pad of paper, or you buy a pen, or you buy a bus ticket, which is £3 these days, you don't have to declare those tiny items of spending, but you do have to declare anything of significance, and they set the level at £20. Notional spending items of £50 and over have to be declared as well. Now, the difference between notional spending and payments are notional spending are done by somebody else. So if, for example, the Heritage Party bought you a flag or a banner or 10,000 leaflets, that would be notional spending because you didn't make the payment yourself. Someone else made the payment, whether it's the Heritage Party or another donor or a business, whatever. Or even if someone has gifted you something to use in your campaign. One of the most common things is if you have a friend who has a hall and you have a public meeting. Not saying that anyone did have a public meeting, is highly unlikely at this level. Local level to do that, but that's an example. If you are gifted the use of a hall for say 3 hours to have a public meeting, it would normally cost £100 to hire a hall, but you got it for free because you know the owner. That would have to be declared as notional spending. You didn't pay anything for yourself. It was gifted to you, but the market rate for that, the use of that item would be over £50 or £50 and over. So you have to declare those kind of notional spending items as well. And then donations over £50. So in this case, a donation of £50 doesn't have to be declared, but a donation of £50 and one pence does have to be declared. Now, there's no harm in you declaring spending items, notional spending items, and donations of less than the thresholds there, but you don't have to declare all of those smaller items that are under those thresholds. Now, here are the forms that we have to fill in. Now, I will go to the declarations first because they're easiest. Now, normally you do this at the end, but yeah, they're easiest to go through because there's not much to them. The candidate declarations and the agent's declaration are pretty much identical, except here it says candidate. In the agent's one, it says agent instead. You just put down the council you're standing for. I've used the example of Devon simply because we have 7 candidates standing in Devon this year, which is more than other places. And I've just picked a ward at random, Barnstaple North. We don't actually have a candidate in Barnstaple North, but you write your division in there, whatever it was. So the county or district goes first, where it says, county or district, whatever. Borough, you cross out the ones that don't apply, write that in and write the ward or division in there. The date of publication of notice of the election, well, in Devon, it was the 25th of March. For your council, it might be different because different councils issued the publication of the notice of election on slightly different days. Some did it on the 25th, some did it on the 24th. Some were the 21st, some were the 20th. You'll have to look it up. You can easily find it online on your council's elections page or on or you can ask your council. You can ask your election office to tell you, and they'll tell you what it is. Write the full name, your full name if you're the candidate here, and you have to put a mark. That can be anything. I suggest putting HP for Heritage Party here because everyone understands that. So write HP in there, and then you sign it and date it. I put the 2nd of May 2025 because that's the day after the election, and it's good to do this as soon as possible so it's out of the way. Now, going down to the agent's declaration, you can see it's exactly the same. If you're your own agent, you'll fill it in exactly the same way. If you have a different agent, then they will sign it with their name because you're not your own agent in that case. But most of you are your own agents, I think, with one exception. So you'll sign the agent's declaration form as well. So, when we are filling in the spending returns, there's 2 ways to think about this. Some of you will not have any spending at all and any donations. So you didn't spend anything on the campaign or you didn't spend anything over those limits that I've just mentioned, £20 for payments, £50 for notional payments and £50 for donations. In which case you can submit a zero return. And that's easier than submitting a return with payments for obvious reasons, because you're not filling in any numbers apart from zero. Now, I've put some guides on here to the different sections, but that will become obvious when I just go through the papers here. Now, let's just go down. Here we are. So it starts off like this. And whatever mark you put on the declarations, HP, you put at the top here as well. The election area and the local authority, you put in the first 2 boxes. That's easy. The electorate is the number of voters in your ward or division. You can find that out from your council. It won't be immediately obvious. Sometimes it's on the declaration of results, sometimes it's not. If it is, great, you can get it from there on the day after the election when the results are declared. If not, you need to ask your council what the electorate is, the number of voters in your ward or division. So that's maybe the more, not so easy, not so obvious to what it is. When you became a candidate, you should know that. That's the day you handed in your forms. The date of election, the 1st of May. In this case, obviously, if you're looking at this in a by-election or other election after May this year, then that date will be different. The date election result was declared the 2nd of May for the local elections in England. Again, that will be different if you are applying this to a by-election later on. You write your name, candidate's name, registered party, Heritage Party. You've got to calculate the spending limit, and that is £960 plus 8 pence per elector. So in this case, if there were 12,334 voters, you multiply that by 8 pence or £0.08, add it to 960 and you get your spending limit. And you're not allowed to spend over that limit in the campaign period by law. So the campaign period is from the date you became a candidate until the date of the election. Things you spent beforehand, you don't have to declare unless you use something solely in the campaign period. And you don't have to declare anything after the date of the election, obviously, because then the election's over. But you're only allowed to spend up to the spending limit in that campaign period between the two dates. So then your agent, its name goes in section 2 there. The date the election agent was appointed is almost certainly going to be the same day as you became a candidate because you normally hand the forms in together. And then you have to tick one of two boxes. If you are the agent, if you have a different agent, then they tick it there. Now, strictly speaking, the agent has to hand in these forms. But as most of you at this time, the candidates, you're usually your own agent. Your agent's name is your name, the candidate's name. But if it's different, the agent is the person who fills in these forms or should fill in the forms. And but most of you will sign the second box to saying, I am the person named as candidate of this election and was my own election agent. I am responsible for delivering this return of candidate election expenses under Part 2 of the Representation of the People Act 1983. So most of you will tick the second box there because you're your own agents. Then you sign it with your signature and write the date in there again. Now, a zero return is easy because in the next section, section 3, which has lots of different subcategories for different items of spending and different manners of payments, everything will be zero and the subtotals will be zero. And then section 4, personal expenses would be zero. Section 5, donations would be zero. So all the numbers for spending and donations in these summary categories in sections 3, 4, and 5 will be zero. So that's easy. You can do that in a minute and then it's done. The itemized pages then, I mean, for the way this works is for all of these subcategories here: advertising, unsolicited materials, transport, etc., and also unpaid claims, disputed claims, payments, notional spending. I don't think those two have the separate items, but separate sheets, but the others certainly do. And so do permissible donations, impermissible donations. There are separate sheets to itemize all those things because you don't have any spending on any of these things. You just write zero in the subtotal on all of the sheets. So advertising, no advertising is zero. Unsolicited material to electors like leaflets, zero. Transport, zero at the bottom. Public meetings, zero. Agents and other staff costs zero, accommodation and administration zero, or other authorized spending zero, personal expenses zero. I should have written zero in there, but I didn't, but you should do yourself. Unpaid claims zero, disputed claims zero, permissible donations zero, impermissible donations zero. So all of these itemized sheets will all say zero and they will tally up with sections 3 and 4 and 5 above. So that's how you fill in a zero return, zero spending and donations return. The most work is in filling in sections 1 and 2, and then all the rest is zero everywhere. So that's that. For spending returns where you have items of spending, payments, notional spending items, and donations above the thresholds, it's a more complicated task because you have to fill in the itemized sheets with every single item of spending, and then you have to go back and tally up the sections in the first few sheets. So I've just put some explanation notes here, which you can look at, but I'll go through these again by looking at the sheets that you have to fill in. So section 1 and section 2 will be done in exactly the same way as if you have a zero return. Your election area, local authority, electorates, date of election, all the dates, etc. Your name, heritage party, the spending limit, agent's name, date agent was appointed, and then you've got to tick the box and then sign it, or whoever's the agent signs it. So that's exactly the same as with a zero return. But sections 3, 4, and 5 will have numbers in them in some places, but some places will still be zero. But the thing is, what to do with this is it's best to skip straight from section 2 to the itemized sheets for all the different subcategories and fill those in first, and then go back and fill in sections 3, 4, and 5. And here's some examples of a fairly simple spending return. I don't think many people's spending returns will be that complicated. You might have one or two different items of spending on there. So advertising would include things like flags, banners, posters, social media advertising that's paid, newspaper adverts that are paid. You may or may not have any of these items. I mean, for example, I've just put down here, someone made a payment for a newspaper advert and then the Heritage Party bought them a flag. So that would be notional spending for an example, okay? So anything of that nature you have to put in the advertising section, and you give them a number 1, 2. Obviously, when you go down, I've got something else there, another sheet that's 3. You 4, 5 would be, you carry the numbering system on alternative sheets. You should have invoices for these things. So yes, unless it was something that no payment was made at all, like someone gifted you a hall, for example, then you would say no because there was no spending done. So newspaper advert, I've just suggested it, like Devon Mail. I don't know if that exists, but it's just an example. If you made the payment, you write your name in there and you write the date the expense was incurred, the receipt was received, the date paid. I normally pay things on the day that I receive the invoice, so that it's done and it's not hanging around. And I've just put there £250 as an example, payment of £250 made. If you had something that's a notional expense, you would have the value here, for example, a flag about £160, but you didn't make a payment. The Heritage Party made it. Well, I made it on behalf of the Heritage Party, so I put my name there. But you could put Heritage Party there as well, because the Heritage Party is legally a person in law, as the is a legal, it's a person as a legal entity. So you can put Heritage Party there, or David Curtin, my name, because I made the payment on behalf of the Heritage Party, but you didn't make the payment, you didn't pay any money, so you put zero there because someone else made the payment apart from you or your agent. And that's how you indicate that it's notional spending. And then you tally up the value there, £410, which is the total of those two items. I've added here an unsolicited material to electors that would normally be leaflets. Okay, so any leaflets over £20, £20 and over that you've paid for, or £50 and over that the Heritage Party's paid for. So here, just as an example, someone who had some leaflets designed, paid for by the Heritage Party, me. Uh, Cost of £185, maybe if you got leaflets for your whole division. You write the date there that they were bought and paid for. And again, this is notional spending for you because you didn't make the payment, someone else made the payment, so you didn't. The payment, the amount paid by you is zero. The value is 185. So you write that in the bottom subtotal there. Um, I'll put permissible donations next because anything that is a notional uh, expense, notional spending, is also a donation to you because someone else paid it. If the Heritage Party paid for things for you, then I've put here that 185 that we saw before for the flag, the £160 for leaflets that we've just put down in the section on unsolicited materials, is a donation to you by somebody else, in this case by the Heritage Party. I've put the registered address of the Heritage Party and our company number at company's house there. And you need to write in those as donations as well as spending up here. So any notional spending items also have to be written down as donations as well. Plus, if you have anybody giving you 50 quid in cash or 100 quid in, not 50 because that's the limit, but someone gives you £60 or £100 in cash, just to help you out, you need to write that down as well. There's no harm, of course, in writing it down. As I said, if you got a cash donation or a check from a friend for less than £50, £25, you can write that in, but you don't have to. Um, Now, then these are the other things which would all be zero. Okay, so I'm just assuming that for most of you, you won't have any payments on transport, which would sort of be if you use your car on election day to go and knock up the vote, get out the vote, and you're spending a lot of petrol on transporting people to polling stations. You probably won't be doing that. Public meetings, I don't think anyone had any public meetings in this campaign, so you probably will have that as zero. Spending in that section, agent and other staff costs. Well, if you actually employed someone to help you on your campaign, you put those items in here, but it's unlikely that you did pay anybody to help you with your campaign, so that's likely to be zero. Accommodation and administration, well, this would be if you hired an office and you paid for internet services, phone services, lots of stationery items and so on that are over £20, or you bought a printer or something. you know Anything like this, is unlikely that you had anything like this in this campaign, so section F will probably be zero there. um, Other authorized spending, probably zero. I can't think of anything else you might have spent items on. Personal expenses, almost certainly zero. That would be if you live outside the area you're standing in and you uh, paid, a train fare over £20, or you stayed in a hotel for a couple of nights, that they would be personal expenses to do with the campaign. Unlikely that any of you have got any of those at this time. Unpaid claims, very unlikely you'll have any of them. Disputed claims, those would be items of spending that you haven't paid for, or items of spending that someone's disputing, that you have to pay for them, or you're disputing the cost of them. I've never ever had any of those ever in the whole time I've ever been in politics, so it's very unlikely you'll have any of those. Impermissible donations, again, it's unlikely you will have any impermissible donations. They're mostly all likely to be permissible donations. Impermissible donations will be donations coming from somebody who is not on the electoral roll, or somebody who's foreign, or a business that is foreign and registered in the Cayman Islands, for example. You're very unlikely to have any of those. So that will probably be zero. I don't, I check donations to make sure that they're all permissible. Is the worst thing is if you get a nice donation from someone and then you find out, oh, they're not on the electoral roll, or they're American, or they're Russian or something. Not that I've ever got any donations from those countries, or any countries actually, apart from the UK. I've never had any donations from anyone outside the UK. But the worst thing is if you do get some donations like that, and then you have to return them because they're impermissible. So, it's unlikely you'll have any of those. And so that's the final sheet. So let's go back to section 3. And now you've filled in the itemized sheets, you can then come back and fill in section 3, 4, and 5. So advertising, we had 410 as our total, 185 was our total of leaflets, unsolicited material to electors. The others was zero, so you write zero in the other sections. They add up to 595. Unpaid claims and disputed claims are likely to be zero. You have to then work out which of the spending items were payments that you made. In this case, the newspaper adverts that I put on section A as an example, 250. Notional spending are things paid for by someone else and gifted to you, and that was £345. It comes to 595, the same as in the subtotal for section 3B. So the subtotals for section 3A and 3B have to be the same. Section 4, personal expenses, most likely zero. Permissible donations, that was 345 from the sheet. And any donations, any money provided by you to meet election expenditure. So you just, say what you spent on the rest of the items, 250. You notice here 345 and 250 adds up to 595, the same as the totals in the payments and the spending categories. So these three things here are likely to add up to the subtotals you've got in columns 3A and 3B, unless you got more donations than spending. So if for example, somebody gave you £500 in cash, as well as the 345 for notional spending from the Heritage Party, your permissible donations in that case would be 845, and that would be more than the columns for payments and spending. That's the case in which these things don't add up to the same as what the columns in section 3 add up to. Because if someone gives you a donation that is more than what you spend, then obviously the amount provided by the candidate you to meet election expenditure would be zero. But in most cases, you will have to, write in what you contributed to your own election expenses there. And that's it. So there you have it. That's how you fill in the spending forms, both for a zero return and also for a return where you have payments, possibly notional spending, and donations as well. And then after you've done that, don't forget to go back and then sign the candidate's declaration and agent's declaration. And the one last thing you do also have to do is attach invoices for the individual spending items. So in that particular example I used there, you would need to provide an invoice for the advertising, for the flags, for the leaflets. Obviously, if been gifted the use of a hall or something that you haven't paid for, no one's paid for, there won't be an invoice for it if it's notional spending like that, where no payments are made by anybody. But if there are, um, then you will have to attach invoices with your spending returns and declarations. The only other thing I should say here is a few of you are standing in two elections on the same day. Some of you are standing in both county and district elections because there are district by-elections. Some of you are standing in a county election and a town council election as well. If you're standing in two elections, you need to do two sets of spending returns and declarations, one for the county, one for the district, or one for the county, one for the town. And you have to hand them both in within 5 weeks. So if you have to do this for every single election you're standing in. So most of you are just standing in one election for the county this time, but if you're standing in two elections on the same day, you need to fill in two sets of returns, spending returns. And if your spending items are used in both campaigns, you can split them in half, or you can allocate a certain amount of spending to one and a certain amount of spending to another. So, for example, say you have a flag that costs £160 and you're using it for campaigning both in the county election and a district election, you can split that in half and allocate 80 to the county and 80 to the district, for example. Or if the how you use it is divided unequally, you can make and you can ascertain, for example, you can estimate that, okay, well, I used 100 for the county and 60 for the district. I mean, if that's reasonable, and write those amounts down. So that's the only complication. If you are standing in more than one election, you have to fill in two sets of forms. But if you've got any questions on that, please do ask me, and I will help you and do my best to answer all your questions. And please do get on with filling these in as soon as you possibly can. It's better to get it done and out of the way in the first week after the elections rather than scrambling around to try and finish it in the final week, and then you realize you've got to physically take them in. You can't post them. Well, you can, but they might get lost in the post. So it's best to physically take them in, get a receipt for them when you've taken them in so that you've got proof that you've handed them in, and then everything's fine, and you don't get into trouble for not handing in spending returns and declarations, because it is a legal requirement to do so. Now, I hope this has been useful to you, and thank you so much, everyone, for standing. All the best in filling these in, and I hope you will all stand again for the Heritage Party as well in days to come. Thank you for listening.